NBC News investigative correspondent. He's in Sanford, Florida. Michael, please give us the latest.
Well, pretty significant development today, Michael. FBI agents showed up at the retreat at Twin Lakes gated community where the Trayvon Martin shooting took place, going door to door, interviewing witnesses, questioning them about what they might have seen, what they knew about the shooting, and also the background of George Zimmerman. Also taking photographs. The evidence response team, the CSI unit was there, all gathering what one FBI official told me is going to be a meticulous, comprehensive investigation of everything that took place that night.
Did we lose Michael? We lost Michael Isikoff. Thank you, Michael. Maybe we'll be able to get you back. For more on this story, let me bring in Michelle Bernard, the president of the Bernard Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy, and E. Stephen Collins, who hosts Philly Speaks on WRNB. Michelle, Stephen, one of the questions surrounding the 911 calls made to police the night of the shooting is just who is heard screaming for help. Let's listen.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your phone number?
There's gunshots.
Two forensic audio experts who analyzed the 911 calls for the Orlando Sentinel now say those screams were not from Zimmerman. One of those experts interviewed, Tom Owen, also told NBC News that his technology, like that used by the CIA and the National Security Agency, is 99% accurate. Michelle Bernard, of what significance is this latest development?
This is enormously significant to the case. Assuming that George Zimmerman is indicted, that we go to trial, you will see obviously that the prosecutor is going to want to introduce this evidence because it's going to go to the heart of the story. And the story that George Zimmerman has been telling the public, that he has told, we believe, to the police department, is that he himself was under attack, that he killed Trayvon Martin in self-defense. And if he was able, for example, to argue that the screaming heard on the tape was himself, it would lend credibility to the argument that he was acting in self-defense. However, if the screaming in the background is in fact Trayvon Martin, and a jury hears that, the jury is more likely to believe that Trayvon Martin was murdered by George Zimmerman. It's a very, very critical piece of information.
What I think you're saying is that it's really, the significance is twofold. One, to the extent that these reports are accurate, that Zimmerman has told law enforcement, that's me on the tape, A, it would make his testimony or his version of events, and perhaps soon-to-be testimony, untruthful. And B, commonsensically, you wouldn't expect the aggressor to be the screamer. You would expect the person who's under attack to be the one screaming. And so really it would be a twofold blow to him.
It would be a twofold blow to him. And also, Michael, if you put together the tape, the audio tape, and any testimony we get about who's screaming on that tape, and put that together with the tapes that we've seen of George Zimmerman when he is with the police and he's in custody, he's handcuffed, he alleges that his nose was broken, he alleges that he had a head injury and that he was bleeding from the back of his head. If a jury looks at that tape and they listen to the screaming of what many people now believe to in fact be Trayvon Martin, you're going to be saying to yourself, did George Zimmerman basically concoct the story, actually engage in racial profiling, and kill an innocent teenager who was armed with nothing but Skittles and iced tea?
Michael Isikoff is back with us now from Sanford, Florida. Michael, you talked about the FBI being on the scene today. Is that independent or in support of the state investigation?
This is a parallel investigation, completely separate, focused on whether there was a civil rights violation. You have the state special prosecutor conducting that investigation into whether to charge George Zimmerman for the shooting itself. What the FBI is doing is a complete report for the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division to see whether there is the basis for a civil rights charge. Was this a hate crime? Was George Zimmerman basically racially targeting Trayvon Martin as part of this? And one crucial piece of evidence here is going to be the history and pattern of George Zimmerman's 911 calls. He called since last August 7 times to police dispatchers. In 5 of those, he was reporting about what he viewed as suspicious activity by young African-American males. They're identified in the 911 call reports as black males. Now, these call reports don't show whether Zimmerman Zimmerman volunteered this information or was responding to questions by police, and that's going to be something that the FBI is going to be looking at. Also, the predicate for those calls. Why was he calling? In one case, the call sheet say he saw some young black males loitering in the area. Now, was that the basis for a 911 call or not? That's the kind of thing the FBI is going to be looking at.
Michael, I've listened to those tapes more times than I should probably admit, and I think that they're loaded with curiosities. To me, one of them is that if it's true that in the last 15 months he's called 46 times, I find it unusual that when he logged this call, he didn't identify himself as a member of the Neighborhood Watch. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's an interesting question. He had been, the Neighborhood Watch only got set up last summer, and that's the point at which he acquired put out his Neighborhood Watch card, which we've seen. He hands it out to neighbors. He was going door to door. Zimmerman was saying, I'm your Neighborhood Watch captain. Call me. Let me know if there's anything suspicious going on. Now, you're raising a good question. I don't know the answer to it. One thing we've asked for and we're waiting for is the actual tapes of the prior 911 calls to see whether he had identified himself as a Neighborhood Watch captain in the previous calls.
Well, I can tell you that he did. I heard some that he did. And Stephen Collins, let me just bring you in because we're all trying to look at this.
Michael, we haven't actually gotten the tapes of the earlier calls yet, so I don't know that we can say that for certain.
Okay, I can tell you that via the Sentinel website, I have listened to additional calls where he does identify himself as a member of Neighborhood Watch. Stephen Collins, we're parsing a lot of details here, more perhaps unknown than known, but with the regard to the Trayvon Martin 911 call, common sense tells me that when he logs it, he says, hey, it's George Zimmerman. You know me from Neighborhood Watch. Here's what I'm looking at. He never says that.
It's interesting because I don't really see him as Neighborhood Watch, Michael. I see him as a guy who had a predisposition. Again, remember, a 17-year-old boy armed with what? A bag of Skittles and an iced tea? He wore a hoodie because that's what's hip. He reminds me of my son and all the other kids that I know who are Trayvon Martin. This is the idea. Here's my problem with this. The local authorities never arrested, which meant he got to go free, but they didn't get the initial investigation underway. There is DNA evidence that's being lost right now because Mr. Martin, 17-year-old, is decomposing. We don't know the trajectory of the bullet. We do not know what kind of physical, real damages were done to his physical self. And in that, we can't determine certain things. This appears to me to be a major, I don't hate using the word cover-up, but it just, why wouldn't the police hold him and do a good, solid investigation?
Stephen, I've been saying for a while now that it'd be helpful to get a map of the area in Sanford, Florida, to get a clear picture of the so-called retreat at Twin Lakes. And today, the New York Times had a great map, and we got our version, we have our own version right here, as a matter of fact. This is an aerial image of the development. On the left, you can see where Trayvon Martin was staying, and on the top of the map, you see George Zimmerman's house. Trayvon likely entered the development one of two ways: the main entrance or the unfenced shortcut that the Times reports residents frequently use to cut through to save time. Zimmerman called 911 when he saw Martin near the clubhouse and identifies the clubhouse as a point of reference. And here's where Trayvon's body was found by Sanford police as he approached the home in which he was staying. Michael Isikoff, you're there. Is there any element, once you're there and you study the geography, that you think would help those of us who are at home understand what went on here?
Well, actually, Michael, I was there over the weekend, and I sort of retraced the route where Trayvon Martin came in and George Zimmerman followed him. And you're right, the spotting begins at the clubhouse, which is near a gate, and then he appears to be watching from his car at a distance. And at some point, as Trayvon Martin continues, there's sort of a back path where which turns behind a row of houses. So Zimmerman would no longer have been able to see Trayvon Martin. He gets out of the car and then follows him there. That's where the confrontation takes place, in a spot where he could not have seen Trayvon Martin originally watching from the car.
A final question, if I might, for Michelle Bernard. Michelle, I've been saying that I need to know two things. I need to know who's crying for help at the end of that 911 call. I also want to know, was a racial epithet said by Zimmerman under his breath at a time when he appears to be, by audio, in pursuit of Trayvon Martin? You know what I'm referring to.
I absolutely know what you're referring to. I have listened to that tape over and over and over again. If you listen to it closely, I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that under his breath, George Zimmerman called Trayvon Martin an effing coon. If you listen to it closely, there's no doubt about it whatsoever. And I got to tell you, when you put all of the evidence together, this is an enormous travesty of justice. If you go back to that map, Michael, if you go back to the map that we just took a look at, George Zimmerman had to have followed Trayvon Martin for quite a distance and quite a period of time after the police told him that they did not need him to follow him, and it ended up, the end result was that this child is dead. He was killed, and it was relentless.
I wish we had more time, but thank you, Michael Isikoff, Michelle Bernard, and E. Stephen Collins.